third year of a pandemic parliament. Parliament House in Canberra was closed to the public today as MPs and senators returned for the first day of sittings on a sparse parliamentary calendar. The corridors and public spaces are empty. The parliamentarians remained socially distanced across the two chambers. The public galleries in the chambers were empty, except for 7 women.
Today, on the first sitting day of 2022, we deliver this statement on behalf of the Parliamentary Cross-Party Leadership Task Force.
We acknowledge the unacceptable history of workplace bullying, sexual harassment and sexual assault
in Commonwealth parliamentary workplaces. This issue is of the greatest importance and the responsibility of all people who work in this place.
Any bullying, sexual assault or sexual harassment is unacceptable and wrong.
We say sorry.
I am sorry. We are sorry. And I particularly want to acknowledge Ms Brittany Higgins, whose experience and, more importantly, courage is the reason why we are all here today. And I want to thank her for that.
You have torn through a silence that has acted as the life support system for the most odious of status quos. To describe your experiences is to relive them. I say to everyone who took part, that took a level of courage that you should never have needed to show. But you did, and we thank you for it.
Parliament House should be the safest workplace in the country. Unfortunately, it isn't, and most certainly in the past it wasn't.
Mr Speaker, men have failed.
5 men standing up to acknowledge a terrible truth about a culture too many have been prepared to look past for too long. Some of the women who had in different ways been victims of that culture and who spoke out to change it, former staffers Brittany Higgins, Rochelle Miller, Josie Coles and Chelsea Potter were there. Chanel Contos, who had led a push last year for young Australian women to share their stories of sexual assault, was there as a reminder that this culture is also, unfortunately, a broader one in our society.
Well, what I would say is that...
But our parliament seems to have trouble dealing with many other issues.
There's issues that we've got to deal with. People have different views on those issues.
The Coalition Party Room continued to grapple with a proposed religious discrimination bill today, which, apart from an address of congratulations to Her Majesty the Queen, was the only significant business listed for the House of Representatives after the apology. But it is a very strange time in federal politics, given we are just months from an election with a conspicuously empty legislative agenda and the future of a federal anti-corruption commission under a cloud. About the only normal part of the parliamentary day today seemed to be question time.
My question is to the Prime Minister. Since the beginning of the year, at least 622 aged care residents have died of COVID, more than double the number of deaths in the whole of last year. It's only the 8th of February. Will the Prime Minister admit responsibility for this crisis?
Less than 10% of those who have passed away in residential aged care facilities may have died with COVID, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, some may wish to pretend that the pandemic and that COVID cannot have an impact to the most vulnerable in our communities. But, Mr Speaker, that would be naive and that would be misleading and that would be false.
While the opposition continued to challenge the government's record on aged care, the Coalition was ramping up its attacks on Anthony Albanese to 11.
And the Leader of the Opposition has also, at a previous Labor conference, moved a motion in favour of death duties, Mr Speaker. Death duties!
You're just lying.
The Manager of Opposition on a point of order.
On a point of order, Mr Speaker, the Treasurer has now gone to completely inventing things that are not true, going down a curious path.
No wonder the member for Fenner has said the Albanese supporters were known as the Bolsheviks, Mr Speaker.
We're all on the same damn side.
The increasingly shrill debate going on inside Parliament House was only outdone by the increasing crowds outside the building. It is hard to believe that, in either forum, there will be much satisfaction found.
The Morrison government's capacity to pass its religious freedom bill is under question after Liberal MP Bridget Archer told the House of Representatives she wouldn't support it. Here's a little of her reasoning.
The simple fact is that this bill would allow for discrimination to happen. And while I support the desire to employ religious school leaders or teachers who share that religious ethos, I don't think that anybody would want to do so if it might cause harm to others. I'm not prepared to stand by and see our state laws eroded to privilege one group over another. It's not okay to be cruel, offensive or humiliating just because you can say it with conviction or point to a religious text to back it up. I'm completely gobsmacked that the proposed religious discrimination bill is even being considered. I find it incomprehensible that this proposed bill will override all anti-discrimination legislation already in place.
Laura Tingle joins me now from Canberra. Laura, what happens if Bridget Archer doesn't vote for the bill?
It's still possible for the government to pass it, Lee, but there are a number of other MPs who've either reserved their position or are suggesting they're still negotiating. After Bridget Archer spoke late this afternoon, Dave Sharma got up, and while he hasn't said that he will cross the floor against the legislation, he's said that he does have reservations. Trent Zimmerman has said that he would also reserve his position. So it's very unclear, particularly with this suggestion that some of these moderate MPs are still trying to negotiate further changes with the Attorney-General, exactly where this is going to land in terms of the numbers on the coalition's own side.
I remember Labor MP Chris Bowen raised after the last election people of faith and Labor needing to pay more attention to them. So what's Labor's position on this bill?
Well, it is very tricky politically for Labor, as it is for the government, Lee, and so we don't know what Labor's position is, and they're saying today, well, you know, these bills have continued to be amended and we still have to consider it. There will presumably be further meetings of the shadow cabinet and caucus to discuss all of this, particularly obviously if there are some more amendments. But just before coming onto air, there's been a very powerful speech by frontbencher Stephen Jones, who's told a very tragic story about his own family where a gay nephew took his own life and they farewelled him last week. And also he's got concerns about his own son. It was an exceptionally powerful contribution to the debate, and I think it once again highlights the real difficulties that Labor will have in deciding what it's going to do about this legislation.
One to watch. Laura Tingle, thank you.
Thanks, Lee.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 730's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.